UDC.
So we're going to go through these 9 primary functions, the first of which is recognizing and declaring an outage. So what we've done, this is a web application that we've built that allows you to use the GIS, the information that you have in your GIS, and recognize or declare your outage. You can, in this scenario, what you see is somebody has suggested that there is an outage along this main, and we need to isolate it. Somebody has gone through and said, I want to do an isolation trace on this pipe, but they've also added a squeeze off on this pipe, which is just down below, and you'll notice that it stops halfway. And it also goes back to an isolation valve before it hits the main. What we've done is we've given them an idea. So to isolate this using this squeeze off and an isolation valve, this is the number of meters or customers that you would have out, the number of valves and number of squeeze offs that are going to be impacted by this outage. This was done utilizing the GIS network trace functionality, but we have a couple different variations in here for identifying your source. We do the trace in the GIS. We have the ability to throw it out to Synergy. If your Synergy model is more connected than your GIS, we can go out to Synergy, do the trace in Synergy, and come back with the results. You can also identify the area. You can use predefined polygons in your GIS as the areas. So if you've already gone through and just created an isolation zone or an isolation area, you can load those in and select one, or you can draw it yourself. If I do the isolation trace, then I know where the valves are, I know where my services are, I know how many meters and everything else. If you have a fully connected GIS, we have everything in there so we can do all of that workflow that we talked about, the 9 primary functions. If you are uploading the customers from a CIS, I don't know where your valves are, I don't know where your mains are, I don't know if you're going to use squeeze offs or anything else. So the best we can do in that case is control your turnoffs and control your turn-ons. So it's a slightly different workflow, but you have that in here, the ability depending on how complete your data is at this point in time, and you can grow into it if you need to. So here we've isolated this area, and 114 meters sounds like a good thing. Obviously, we could add another squeeze off in here to kind of reduce it if we wanted to just try to go in there and make it even smaller. But at this point, for this outage, that's what we chose to do. Once it's been declared.
Where does the squeeze off, Faye, where does that other data in that form come from? Valves and squeeze offs. Where does that data come from?
So because I did the trace, the valves are actually in the GIS in this data model that we have. So it does a trace until it finds an isolation valve. So it's just doing an isolation trace in the GIS, basic GIS functionality. The squeeze off, now technically when I do this, I do the isolation trace and it will actually find 215 meters because it comes down, it's a little further, you can't see it, but there's another isolation valve down there. I decided that was too large, so I added the squeeze off myself. That is something that using the map, you come in, you pick a point on the map and it says, okay, this is my squeeze off. I can do it on a main or I can do it, this is another type of valve here. I could use, it's a non-controllable fitting in this data set. So we've configured it so I can use non-controllable fittings as squeeze off points as well. But I get to pick what those areas are.
So those summary fields are populated automatically. They're not filled in by anybody that's controlling the outage.
Correct. It calculates that information based on how you've identified it. So what you can't see here, and if I do a demo, you would see it. There's a preview button. The preview button says, this is how many people would be impacted if this is really what you want to do. And at that point, you get to manipulate, add your squeeze offs, decide if that's truly what you wanted to do. At that point, you could break it up into smaller outages if there was some way to control it, meaning control the outage in smaller pieces. And then when you're finished, I want to say manipulating your outage, then you hit submit. And that submit is what's going to generate all of the work that needs to get done.
And the summary.
Yes. No, the summary, as soon as you do the preview, the summary is there.
Oh, okay. Even before that. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So this button here switches between preview when you first come in and update when you make changes. And as you update it and make changes, This summary will get updated with whatever and should reflect everything that you see on the GIS that it's calculated will be impacted. And so, good call. I should have mentioned the submit time. When you hit the submit, that's when it's actually going to start generating all of the work based on what you've selected. So this is where it's going to generate the customers that need to be turned off and turned on. It will create work for the valves that need to be, I always get this wrong, opened up and closed. And then any sort of squeeze off. So it will create the work for the squeeze offs. Assuming you've done a trace or in these workflows, you will get your turnoffs, and then you will go through and get a repair. There's just one work item created for repair. And that's just because we don't know the extent of what you need to do. So at that point, it's really just a flag to say, hey, we're done this work, let's continue. And then you would repressurize the system. At that point, you would open your valves and repair your squeeze offs. You would identify your repressurization points and manage those. Once that's complete, you go into leak survey. So all of the work for this, and then relights. All of the work is being generated at this point. When you declare the outage, you had the ability to update the estimated time to restore. But as the outage work is being generated and as the outage is continuing, there is the ability to update that. And that would get reflected in the dashboards that we'll see later on in the workflow. So now when we get to dispatch and perform the shutoffs, that's the first step in this workflow. There is an event management module that controls all of the work. So I've gone into the outage that we just defined for Bark Ridge Court. And I have selected, using my map, I have selected this one section. And it has filtered my list. You can see that it's filtered those rows, and I've selected those 12. And I'm going to assign them to a specific field tech. So that work would go out to him in the field. So this would be dispatching or assigning work from the office to the field. Once that's been done, the user just needs to sync their mobile device. And at this point, it could be iOS or Windows. Those are the platforms that we currently support. But because it was written using Xamarin, this may be a little low level, we have the ability, it is a build once, deploy to many different platforms. So Android is expected to be available shortly. So in here, you can see this is all of the work that was assigned. It's a different area than what we had just assigned to Jalaj because I am a different user. So I can see only my work. I have gone through and selected each of these points. Let's say I just did the cul-de-sac to shut everybody off. I tapped on these points to say these 3 or these 4 items. It selects them in the list, and I can use this check mark to say I'm done. So it's a very fast complete when you're in the field. If you need to track information for each of those, the very quick complete won't work because you have mandatory fields that would not be filled in, and you would use the edit button to edit the form. And you could fill in the additional information. If you have an exception, like you can't get in, and you wanted somebody else to come back and try it another time, you would open up the form, indicate that you can't get in, it would come back as an exception, and somebody could manage it through that process.
Yeah, this is Mike Gallinaro. I have a quick question. I'm sorry I couldn't get it out in the first part. So is this system, does this pick up unplanned outages or at least for planned outages?
You can use it for both.
So it can't pick up unplanned outages?
Yes.
Because that's okay. Good. No, that's interesting. That's very good. All right. Thank you.
So once all of that is complete, we kind of showed the meter shutoffs at this point, but that would include all your valves and creating your squeeze offs. We would have to dispatch and perform the system reconfiguration. I'd mentioned earlier that system reconfiguration is kind of the repair step where you fix the outage. There is just one single work item, which you can see here on the left. The list only has one item. And it is shown spatially as the entire area of the outage. There are 2 ways to complete this. Obviously, you saw that you can assign it to somebody, dispatch it to the field, and complete it. But you can also complete it if it's a back office function where somebody just gets a call and says, okay, the repair is done. You can complete it from the web page. But here it is on the mobile. So on a tablet, you would have this one item, all outages, and you would just hit complete, or you could track the information. If you had additional information that you wanted to, You can click edit and get the form so that you can see the information. Okay, bottom right corner, I'm dispatch and perform the repressurization step. This one is it's got two, repressurization and leak survey, but it's the same pattern. So we're reusing event module. We just have different work. We want to open the valves and repair the squeeze-offs. We're going to assign them to Sean. So here he's doing the squeeze-off. You'll see it indicates the pipe. It's a gray dot, and it's got a highlight on it as well. Ideally, he would fill out the form because there's going to be additional information that he's going to want to record so that we can keep track of the information or any maintenance that was done on the pipe. And then he can complete that work. And when it syncs, they move into the next step, which is leak survey. Leak survey is for the entire area. You want to make sure that there are no leaks that have come out. So here you have one item. It's the leak survey, and it's on the entire area. Similar to the repair, you can assign it out to the field, and then somebody in the field can either walk, drive, or do what they need to do to complete that survey. Now, dispatching and performing relights. Same idea. We've got more things that we have to actually dispatch. So again, I've used my map to select this end section over here, and it is filtered, and I've selected them, and I'm going to assign that work to Sean. So it's really just select them in the list, click the button to assign, the panel opens, and you select the user that you want to assign it to. He syncs his tablet, and he gets all of the turn-ons for those meters. Now, in this case, I will mention our data set does not have meters to customers. We kind of stop at the meter because this is configurable. Having both the activity of turning on the meter as well as turning on individuals, I want to say services or customers, is a configuration step based on your data. Provided you have that data, we can do it. But it's the same idea. When I'm on the tablet, I can select the work items. It will select them in my list here by checking them. And I can do a very fast complete to say the work was done. Or individually, I would fill out the form for each of them when it syncs back. It can continue the workflow, either managing, I would call it the exceptions, the can't get ins, or any other scenario that needs to go through. The outage premise and progress. So as everything gets synced and everything is getting updated, we have the events module. There are a couple different modules. I'd mentioned there's an events module. This gives you all of the work that needs to be done. There's a history module that shows you what's been completed. There is an exceptions module that shows you what is an exception. Regardless of which module you're in, you still have your map. And here you can see that we're symbolizing each of the meters, in this case, based on whether it is, I'm going to go down here, on and needs to be turned off. On needs to be turned off, but it's got a CGI associated with it. So using the symbology on the map, once you've memorized this list and how the colors actually work, you can tell whether or not there is an issue. So here we've got the yellow outside and a gray inside. It is off and needs to be turned on, but there is a CGI that somebody needs to address. So this symbology gets updated as everything gets synced back in the field. It's available to anybody that has access to the app. But the next one is communicating the outage completion. And for that, we've created a dashboard. Now this is kind of just the base out-of-the-box dashboard that will communicate the outage status. Now in this case, this is my demo data set, so I have a few more outages in here that have not been completed, and they've been open for a lot longer than any outage ever should last. But the idea is all of these widgets along the outside. So this starburst up in the top right corner, it has a company, division, and district, and then an outage level. If I click on any one of those levels, it will zoom to the area and show me the information in that area. So it's kind of providing me with a rolled up view of all of the outages that are currently being worked so that you have an idea of how many total customers are off. Down below, you can see the customers off, and you can see that as they get turned on, we get the green line and the red line. So as you're working an outage, those will cross and things will get better. Behind the communicate outage is actually the state of an individual outage. So this yellow one is nearly complete. So those steps, the progression through the workflow of turning things off, repairing the outage, repressurizing, leak survey, and then turning everything back on. That's what these bars are representing here. But all of these widgets around the outside are linked in. So if I had actually selected, let's say, Oak Hill 4, it would filter the rest of the widgets and zoom the map to that area so that I am looking at the view for that specific outage.
UDC